Welcome to Damsels in Dialogue, a podcast dedicated to female protagonists in fiction, film, and the stage. Co-hosted by Katie Zutter
and India Marie Paul. For the 4th season, we take a deep dive into the leading ladies of the Golden Age musicals and discuss just how well these Hollywood and Broadway characters have aged.
This episode, we snap into the streets of Manhattan and see if somewhere there's a place for Maria and Anita in West Side Story. Welcome to our episode of Damsels in Dialogue, all about West Side Story.
Yes. It's like that little opening whistle, man.
Yes.
Just gets me every time.
Yes. This is probably, I would say this is probably one of the most iconic. Like, we've talked about a lot of really big shows this season, but this one's the most iconic. Like, so far so as this has been hailed as the best movie musical of all time. It has been inducted into the Library of Congress. Like,
Singing in the Rain was
pretty early on.
We had some, that's we got the big ones. I love it.
Yeah. So this is one of the top movie musicals.
Yeah, it really is.
They specify. Yeah. Which is so interesting to me going into this deep dive because I mean, I've obviously seen the original movie. I think that's a staple. But I feel like I knew it originally from it's the Romeo and Juliet retelling.
Yeah.
You know it from it being a stage musical that has heavy dance.
Yeah.
Much like of its generation of the Golden Age genre, very heavy in dance. Very heavily inlaid with dance, much like others. We mentioned in previous episodes, even though we didn't talk about this, but it's been brought up just because it's a pivotal point for shows. Oklahoma was that that movement of but dances can be a plot point, and this took that and ran with it. Where they also have a ballad, but they were like, no, all of the dance will be a plot point.
It definitely feels like people point to the Jerome Robbins choreography of West Side Story as like a moment of shifting in storytelling with dance. So Oklahoma started it and used dance as a storytelling tool.
That was the first one to do it. And then Jerome was like, got you.
I'm here. Come join me up here.
So
it's really stunning.
It's really cool. It opened up a lot of doors for a lot of different people in the future. For a lot of different reasons. I'm a very briefly talk about the making of it because A, we all know it, B, it's all men. I want to get to the ladies. But I will say there is a woman somewhere in the process. So, as a quick drive-by, and we'll deep dive into this in the after hours if you'd like to hear about it, because there's quite a bit. So, originally, Jerome Robbins, dropped out a bunch of times, and then was, asked back, and then dropped out, and then so, that happened a bunch. There was also, the original was Bernstein and Lawrence were always on the project, and just a fun fact, just because this is cool. A fun fact before we buzz through the rest of it and get to the ladies. So this was originally a story about, it was East Side Story, and it was the Catholic Protestant back and forth. They wrote the majority of the show, looked into it, took years, 5 years of them doing this. And then they're like, oh, there's already a show like this. There's already lots of shows like this. Tons. So they gave up and they were like, we're done. So then they waited another 5 years and then came back and saw they were in LA and this was always in New York. It just was East Side Story. And then they saw an article about the gang life in the West Side. And they're like, so we could do the same concept. But flavor it differently so that it is new, which I think is very clever. I had somebody tell me once that every story has already been written. It's just a matter of how you tell it. And this is, I think, an exact, a perfect example, because not only is it a Romeo and Juliet retelling, which there's a bajillion of those, but also even their reiteration, they're like, wait, no one's done it like this before. Let me do it like this. And since then, it sparked a ton of other iterations, specifically of West Side Story, not even just of Romeo and Juliet, which I think is so cool. Now, Sondheim was not their first pick. Sondheim was not their first pick. Their first pick, which I wanted to mention, there's another man involved, Adolph Green, but Betty Comden.
Yes.
was Betty Comden and Adolph Green. They worked together for 6 decades. I do, side note, I do love that the golden age, unlike things now, you don't hear a whole lot about duos that have been working together for like literal decades that are still really, really popular right now, at least in the music theater industry. There's a handful. There's like the Pasek and Pauls, but it's not like it
young
doesn't
ones.
Yes, it doesn't feel the same as like we've had now multiple, whether they be a couple or whether they be just their person, their friendships that are decades spanning relationships working on theater in this season. And I think that's really, really cool. But Betty Comden and Adolph Green did turn it down in lieu of Peter Pan.
Oh.
So
you know what? I think they ended up with the best pair for the musical. I really think it was a stunning pair.
Yeah. It all worked out for the best.
Yeah.
But I thought that was interesting. I didn't know. And it does make sense why they took a chance on Sondheim, because he was so young and he literally had done nothing before. This was his first thing. And famously, at the time, he was really, really upset about it because he wanted to do all of it. But later, when you see interviews of him older, he is much better about it. And he's like, no, it was good.
Yeah.
Like maybe he needed to be humbled a little bit at the start of his career. Obviously, now he's doing the humbling for everyone else because he's an icon. But like,
at the beginning of his career, he did only like 2. I think this and Gypsy and maybe one more that I'm not sure about, like, were the only times he actually collaborated on music and lyrics in any way.
Which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Because I think he could have done even more than what he did.
Yeah.
But anyway, that'll be an after-hours conversation. Yep. So they brought him on, did some lyrics. More about the show itself is they really wanted to push the buttons. And Sondheim especially, he wanted this to be the first, welcome to PG-13, fuck you, in a musical. And then decided that may not play so well to the audience for Broadway. The Broadway audience wouldn't maybe take to that. So that's where Krupp You came from. And everyone was like, what is that? But it's fine. It worked.
It works. We all know.
All of the interviews I went through and all the stuff that I looked up, they were like, that was a choice. Yeah. But what else would you do there?
Yeah. Like what you can't just say it. Like, right. So I mean, this is in the 50s, right? Like,
yes. Well, and that's specifically Broadway. Movies were doing it already.
Oh.
But Broadway was not. So that is why, we'll talk about later why that is a big difference. With this pushing the boundaries, Jerome actually went into schools. So he actually went into high schools, like undercover, and watched Puerto Rican dancing.
Oh.
So that is where the choreography comes from. It's not like he pulled it from that. It's not like he pulled his traditional schools. Ballet background. It is from actual high schoolers, which is why actually Bernstein's daughter was interviewed, and she said her favorite iteration of this show and who gets it the most and who tends to do it the best, in her opinion, is high schools. Because high schoolers, that's not only is that the age the show is designed around, but they're the only ones that quite get the angst right. Because it's designed for and around them, you know?
Yeah.
I thought that was a really clever comment. And a very interesting comment, because I don't think you hear that very often. You know, in previous shows we've talked about, it's been like, oh, it's the cult classic that's done in local community theaters. This like is shown the best. This is what they're feeling, this is what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, and that's why like you read Romeo and Juliet in high school, because I'm like, they're teenagers and all those feelings and all that, like the drama.
Yes, it is.
The feelings.
When you read it as an adult, you're like, you moron.
What are you doing?
But as a high schooler, as a middle schooler, you're like, yeah, for sure, I'd rather die.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really interesting take. So the show has obviously lasted a very long time. Not only returning back to the context where they made it Puerto Rican and then air quote American, really white.
Yep.
So, and you have the Sharks and the Jets and all of that. So when casting this show, and this is something that's been talked about a lot already, that they at the time, regardless of, you had Jerome Robbins like going into schools, like I mentioned, watching the Puerto Rican kids, learning the dances. Yep. And that's why there's a lot of movements that are jerky and more wild and more fresh, because they're fresh, they're new, because they're high school dance movements. They're not professionally trained things. Now, one thing that was important, they wanted all dancers.
Yeah, that's
like
fair.
Actual dancers.
Yep.
So there's a lot of dancers in this show. It's like dancers first, singer second. Yeah. And they did that very similarly for the movie as well. They wanted dancers, which makes sense. And fun fact, Jerome Robbins only said yes because they said, fine, we'll have a 8-week rehearsal process instead of a 4-week
That's right,
process.
instead of 4.
Yeah. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it.
Double dance process.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
my God.
Which is so funny that he was like so back and forth, and he's like, fine, I'll do it.
Wasn't he like one of the original people who like, let's do this show?
Yeah, and then he's like, no, I'm out.
Like, no.
Yeah, he was in and out like a bunch. And he, like I said, like he didn't, it's not like he wrote a bunch of it.
No.
Like he just was involved, like he just like was in the room as it happened, and then would occasionally be like, nah, I'm busy, I'm doing stuff. Because he was also doing stuff in LA. He was back and forth, honestly, more than the others, because he was doing all sorts of stuff. Because dance was very, very big. This was truly the golden age of dance, not just
yes
that. So a lot of the actors were dancers, which was very cool and very interesting, because now they had a whole new thing they had to do. Now they had to really make sure that these dancers knew how to act and portray this very gut-wrenching show. Yeah. Bernstein makes a bunch of comments, like he's often quoted as like, I was a little nervous when Act 1 ended with bodies. Like dead bodies on the ground, but like that, we started with Act 2 with "I Feel Pretty" to hopefully make up for it. But he like says it laughing, like it's never like dead serious. Like this was a very well thought out thing. He was like, "I hope they don't leave."
I hope everyone's up. Yeah. The context of like this. I mean, we talked about the stuff, how happy and funny a lot of the shows were. Even if there are certain, like, there's a lot of joy and escapism in the Golden Age. And this one's like, let's put reality. Because what I love most, like, they're writing about what was happening in that time. This is not a historical piece.
No. It's not like The Sound of Music, which did a very similar thing of being like, everything's happy. Wait, there's Nazis.
Yeah.
like we're not pretending that's not happening.
Yeah.
But it's different when it's happening at the same time as the show is made. So actually, speaking of that, they did alter language. They did not want to use actual slang because they feared it would age the show too fast. So instead, the slang they use is all fake and made up.
That makes sense.
To make it a little more timeless, which is awesome. So going on from the casting of the dancers and all of that. So because they cast dancers and had to turn them into actors, unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot of input from the actors, which is not the end of the world. We've talked about shows in the past that still, like in this season alone, that have aged well without the actors' input. But it is so great when there is actor input that changes things.
Yeah.
So I do understand that they were trying, they had a little more work cut out for them, because this is normally they're doing it the other way. The dancers are more of the chorus, the big, huge dance numbers. They're not like the leading characters. So I understand that it's a totally different type of acting for a lot of these people. They had to do different things. But unfortunately, they didn't have a whole lot to do with it. Also, they couldn't, because there wasn't many people who actually were of color in this show. Che Rivera was one of the only ones.
Which is great that they cast someone in this time period too.
But not necessarily, because they had cast other people in previous shows. They had cast Asian as the lead dancers in shows. Jerome Robbins did when the Asian American, when that conflict was happening, like they had pushed the boundaries before. So it was a little disappointing that they relied so heavily on Chita Rivera and did not look for anyone else. Like you knew enough to go into the high schools to watch specifically Puerto Rican kids.
Yeah.
And you only cast Chita Rivera. Now this is, I say only because those are like of the main leads. I most likely were others in the show. But it was still like, that was a little disappointing, because I'm like, you knew
You know it's
but
correct.
you didn't do it.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a bummer. But I think that's also why Chita Rivera blew up so much, because they put now don't get me wrong, she's still incredibly talented, amazing and flawless. Yes. But they pushed her hard. Like, look, we have a half Puerto Rican woman in the show. Yeah. Which I think if your name is blasted all over for the 2 years, because fun fact, she also originated the show on the West End as well.
Oh,
she was
cool.
sent over to London to do that as well. So when you're blasted around for 2 years, of course everyone's going to know your name and you're going to be brought back into things and do all that. So I love that still happened for her. I just wish she wasn't the only one. Yeah. And that is a big complaint for a lot. And that does continue on into the movie as well, which we'll briefly mention later in this episode. But now that we have the background, because I'm not going to explain Romeo and Juliet to you. You all know.
If you haven't, like, you've all heard the houses, star-crossed lovers, death.
Yeah, death. It's great. It's great. The only difference is, spoiler alert, Maria does not die.
Yes. Yeah. There is a little bit of that.
Right. It does make a very devastating moment at the end. So, but do we want to talk about Maria or Anita first? Both of them have like pretty solid. And I will say in this show, similar to, and I don't know if this is like a time period thing or if this is just we picked the shows that did this, but similar to Pajama Game, there's also quite a few named women and named like background characters that don't have a lot to do with the plot, but like are still named and not just like chorus member that we're throwing lines at.
That was a big thing,
which I thought was
for this show that West Side Story did a really wonderful job of, and actually was one of the examples that people mention when they say, let's talk about fleshing out all characters, not just having a number by chorus boy or whatever. And so this one, West Side Story is cited. I don't think it's the first one that ever did it, but it's cited as one of the most important advances.
Because, well, Pajama Game did it.
But exactly.
We talked about a couple, so I'm like, this is kind of interesting.
But with the dancer chorus, a lot of dancers don't get names. So when they're in it, so it became a huge deal that every single jet and every single shark had a name, and you usually hear it. It's not just that they had one, but that they had a line and that they're called it in the show. So it became like the idea of ensemble after the show was shifted a lot more because of what they did in West Side Story. And again, other people had done it, but as far as like the dance chorus, because it was so heavily involved in the leading stuff, that's when it became a little bit of a shift for the chorus idea in the ensemble.
They did try to manufacture the reality that was happening because so many of the actors just didn't. Yeah. You just can't know. And that's why, and things have changed. Things definitely throughout the years of how is the best way to represent stories. Right now, own voice stories are the best to do right now. And unfortunately, they're outside of, Anita. There was nobody who could do their own voice. So instead, what they did was they made it a rule that they cast could not mingle. The Jets and the Sharks could not interact with each other outside. They had to be separated to help try and like force that relationship, if that makes sense. Which is a very interesting plot. It did not work for one relationship. Cheetah and a jet got married and have have a child, have children. Yes, they did get together.
Fantastic.
Married. So that's so funny that they were like, we're going to do this and it's going to be so cool and it's going to be so like immersive for the actors. And then they're like, but what if we still have star-crossed lovers?
That's amazing.
And it wasn't like their counterparts. It was like a lead dancer. That's so cool. So that's so funny to me that they were like, we're going to do this. And then she's like, nah. I love that one. But jumping into Anita. Yeah. So Anita was, or not Anita, what am I saying? Maria was what I'm going to do first. Katie, get it together.
It's okay.
So Carol Lawrence was the first one she originated her. Fun fact, she is from Morris Park, Illinois. So she's pretty close to the Chicagoland area. It was very common too throughout the entire process of West Side Story of like many of its iterations was to cast Italians. Yeah. Which had their own, like, the Italian history in New York is like, is very like the Irish history. But it's not racially okay. It's still inappropriate. It's still inappropriate. It's still inappropriate. But also, like, there's other stories that Italians have a fascinating history too. Yes. Like, but not these ones. Yeah. So, But she did do a bunch. She did get a nomination for West Side Story.
Oh.
She didn't win. West Side Story did not win very many. It was nominated for 6, only won 2. It did not do well as far as musicals go. That's why it's the best. It's argued as one of the best movie musicals because the movie did phenomenally, and that's why it's so big. It's not from the show. The show was not accepted very well, and it didn't last as long as other shows did. It only ran for like 700 shows or something like that, which is still very good,
still successful.
But compared to some of the other ones that we've mentioned, not nearly as good as the movie that like absolutely blew up. So actually, when you look up all the stuff, most of it's about the movie because the movie was more popular, and the movie is what made the musical popular.
Yeah.
Which I did not know because I started with the music theater background. So I was like, man.
I definitely started with the movie. So that's
Yes, the movie is what made it popular. Because, it didn't, I think it lost to Singing in the Rain. Or not Singing in the Rain. What am I saying? That doesn't make any sense. It lost to Music Man.
Oh, which we're talking about next week.
Isn't that interesting?
That's
I was
fascinating.
Like, look at us. So we'll jump right into that next. Yeah. So, but she still was nominated. They still had the 6th nomination. She was known for originating that role, and she continued to do like a bunch of smaller things, but that definitely was like the biggest. She also was in The Kiss of the Spider Woman.
Oh, with Cheetah.
No, she replaced Cheetah.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Cool.
So it's interesting too. And once again, another thing where like now we know that that's not appropriate.
Yeah.
Like Italians and Puerto Ricans are not like interchangeable.
They're not the same at all.
But interesting that they were all lumped like that in that time period.
We've grown since then as an art form.
Oh my gosh. Still have ways to go, but we're getting there, friends. But very strong dancer, all of that. So then.
And I do think like they did they had so much dance that I do think the music is so beautiful that it was important that Tony and Maria did not have to dance as much because they could focus on getting those singers because it
they were still dancers though.
They were not. They definitely could move. They definitely had to be able to.
Yeah, they were dancers first. They were not singers first because Bernstein made a comment about that a couple times where they all had dancers first. Now, don't get me wrong. They all did great. They all still sang well. You can be a triple threat. That is what the golden age made Broadway.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that later, actually.
I'm sure Bernstein had lots of opinions about that.
So, but his music is very... It's very operatic, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
So, but as far as her character goes,
yes,
I think this is so interesting, and she is such a well-rounded character because at the start of it, for everyone, at the start of this movie, from the point of view of Maria, this is a sweet, innocent, like getting ready, essentially for prom.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, like getting ready for prom. It's innocent. It feels so real. And by the end of it, she is giving everyone, adults included, a lecture on life that you 1,000% believe.
Oh, that's why it hits so hard. If it's the idea of the naive person who still has hope, like telling the world how awful they are, and that hits so much harder than someone who has any kind of cynicism.
Yes.
And I think she's set up really well in it because I think isn't even going to the dance itself like a struggle, like her being allowed to, like don't they set up this like controlled environment that she has to break out of to even go? Like it's not even it's very high school. It feels very like we're trying to protect our young daughter. Like and of course there's also the added there's the added racism and the added like you know on both sides you do not talk to the white people and you don't talk to the brown people of the Sharks and the Jets. So it had like multiple layers of like we're trying to protect this sweet innocent girl, and in a way her counterpart Tony is in a similar situation. Not quite as drastic because she's the girl and she's the flower and she, you know, but they kind of treat him similarly as the golden boy. He's the golden child. He's very, you know. They work very hard to protect both of these characters because everyone knows that they're good, in their heart and whatever version of good that they believe.
Right.
Like, they believe that. So they are two characters who definitely have people looking out for them the entire time, which makes it even more tragic when they're lost, you know?
Yes.
Or, like,
and you love them. We've talked about a lot of relationships between main characters during this season. Yep. Some that we totally believe and others that we're terrified of.
Yep.
This one, especially the way the rest of the cast treats them, not only their own innocent, because obviously they both just like, they genuinely just fall for each other.
Yes.
They don't,
100%.
It is not, you know, they don't see anything but who the other is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like they see all the things that this is going to sound so weird. So they see in each other what their friends see in them.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes. I agree with that.
Like all of the goodness in the other person. They're like, you know, and obviously at first it's like, oh, they're pretty, which we're in high school.
Yeah. we're still doing Romeo and Juliet, you know, like
it still starts with, you're pretty.
Love at first sight. But like, you believe it because of the age. Like, you believe that.
Yes. The age makes sense. The way they're both spoken of being so good and sweet and like innocent, you know, like on both sides. You're like, of course. I totally believe that Tony doesn't see her as attached to the Sharks and is just a beautiful girl he danced with and now he's obsessed with. Like, and vice versa. It doesn't feel cringy. It doesn't feel weird. No. It doesn't feel forced on either side because they both organically come together. It doesn't feel it. And maybe because it is young. I don't know. What were you going to say?
Well, it's like Tony starts the show coming out of like a juvenile center or something. And then like, so you also see him at a point in his life where he wants to reform even before Maria.
Yes.
That he wants to like be better. So you're also wishing for him to have that innocence and that goodness come to him because he's trying to not cause problems anymore because he's seen some stuff. So he's innocent in a different way, which I think is really interesting too. So when you see both of them come together, you're seeing him find something more important than gang life. So it's even more powerful that you want him to find love.
Yeah.
And then she's like, they do such a beautiful job with the Palmer's Kiss, which is the Shakespeare like moment with that little dance behind the bleachers and the little dream. I'm like, God, like they put in dance this cute little like love moment. It's just so like everything's fading away. You just know because everyone knows this is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, so you just know where it's going, which makes it more sad. So you're just like, no,
you feel for them, and I think that does because Maria could easily fall into the pit of some of the women in this genre and in this time period of just being ingenue. And it's interesting because up until that final moment, there's not much she does that changes the plot.
True.
Really not much at all. Which is not necessarily bad. It's kind of like that Cinderella effect.
Yeah.
Of Cinderella doesn't move the plot forward at all. Everything happens to her. But you want her to win because she's so good. And Maria is the same way. You want her to win because she's so good and she deserves it, you know? Yeah. So when she gets together with him, you're desperately trying to ignore.
Yep. It's fine. It's going to be
the gang violence, the bodies. You're brought back to I feel pretty. And you're like, yes, you are pretty.
So pretty. You feel pretty.
You deserve it. You know, and the one moment that does pull her out of that stereotype of just being the ingenue that everything happens to, which is not that's not a bad trope. That definitely works. Once again, Cinderella. But for that moment at the end where and it's not that she's delivering a speech, she's holding a gun. She threatens to kill herself.
Gave the ingenue a gun.
And then she points it at everyone else and is like, what if you're next? What if you're next?
Oh,
like,
God, yeah.
My gosh. And that is what turns the tides for everyone. And that's how you leave the show. You leave the show with that. It's not like a big, rousing group dance number, shapoopy. Like it's not, not that it's a dance number, but or final number, but you know what I mean? Like it's not.
Everything's not okay at the end.
No.
And that's that's so unique in this time period. Like, it is unique.
They did have somebody walk out. There was a guy, Sondheim watched this happen, where this guy come in, and his theory, because obviously he did not talk to this man, what he thinks is the guy like got off work, and I was like, and at the time, I mean, it was like going to see a movie. It was very, Broadway was popping off, if you will. That was the place to go. So after work, maybe he had a hard day. All right, I'm gonna get a drink. I'm gonna go see a show. I'm gonna kick off my shoes. Have my cares float away, which is what a lot of the Golden Age musicals were. They were very escapist. It was very like, this is fun and sugary and designed for you to just relax. And he went to that. He didn't even finish the first number. Got up, left. Sometimes like he probably went to a bar.
So he's like, this is
not what I
didn't sign up to think or feel. I did not sign up for that.
Exactly. So it was so funny. But a show doing that and still, and that's another reason, like, Broadway wasn't ready for that kind of thing, which is why it didn't do as well. Still won 2 Tonys, was nominated for 6, but in the, when you're looking at other musicals, that is very low. For Tony Awards, especially for a show this iconic. So it did push those boundaries, and I think a lot of that was not only the context, but you're left with that beautiful gut-wrenching monologue too. It wasn't a song, which also is really important because most of the time in musicals, there are very few monologues in musicals, because if you'd be monologue, you'd be singing. And she's not.
The choices, to be honest, and like her conversation, we'll talk a little bit at the end of Maria about her and Anita's relationship, because
and then we could segue into perfect timing.
But what I'll say is, like, the honest conversations that everyone has with her and with Tony about what is happening in the world is so different than like, oh, we're casually just in this idea of a gang version of New York. And they went, no, it's real. Are in it. It is happening. It's real. You have to have the discussion of, you can't talk to these people. Like, because it's actually consequent. Like, there's actual consequences of these things. Right.
And it's different. They did it differently than another show that I also mentioned before, Sound of Music, that's also dealing with a very real, terrible thing. The difference between those two, which also may have made Sound of Music more palatable at the time, was you were never allowed to forget in West Side Story. And, as much as Anita grew to understand their relationship between Tony and Maria and everything, her and others were constantly reminding Maria of the state of the world. And like, we've been trying to raise you in this bubble, and we want you to be, American and do all these things, but like, these are the reasons why we can't do everything that they can do. Whereas the Sound of Music, you could forget. Forget, and then Ralph would come in. And then you were devastated. And then the whole play took a turn. Whereas this, you were never allowed to forget. It was always, even the songs, and they're getting ready and it's fun, there'd be some sort of segue into, but this is why you can't do this. Or we're having a fight between the Charles and Jets. Or we're arguing with the police. Or, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And like, and something that also separates you even more from Sound of Music is that it was written a decade after it all happened. So like, a lot of the theaters in Broadway are in Midtown Manhattan or on the west-ish side of Manhattan. So you are walking out of that theater once you've seen West Side Story and potentially witnessing some of the things that was just discussed, or on the news, you're witnessing things that were discussed.
You're getting the newspaper, which is exactly how the whole show started. The newspaper. So I think all of the reasons we just discussed is why at the time, I just keep prefacing because obviously now West Side Story is it's but amazing. At the time it makes sense why it wasn't, received as well as they hoped. But I'm really glad they stuck with it. And Maria's such a sweet and innocent part. And I get it. I get why Burnside's daughter, when she made those comments of, she loves it when high schools do it. Because it's like, as we mentioned, it's hard to relate to, but did I love him?
There's that moment with her and Anita where she's like, he just killed your cousin, Bernardo.
Yes, cousin.
Yeah, he's killed your cousin. And she's like, but I still love him. And I'm just like, that passion.
Like sleeps with him right after.
Yeah, that passion is very young and very teenage hormone-y. So as soon as you like have someone who's like in their 20s, you're like, oh, of course, you need to logically think about there's no
and you wouldn't believe it.
This.
It wouldn't work. Yeah. So it's so interesting that some of the critiques we had about other shows, these ones have the same critiques, but they work in this one because of the age and the context. Yeah. You know, this is where all those things were done well.
Yes.
And done right.
Yes.
I think that was really, really cool. I've talked about it ad nauseum. So my favorite is that turn. I love that she's the ingenue that at the end, because it throws you too. I mean, not that you've been there the whole time. You've been there the whole time with her, falling in love with him, having this really close relationship with Anita, who's her cousin, who's also she's very close with.
Yeah.
She's close with her cousin. Anita is one of her closest friends who is dating her cousin. Like she already treats Anita as family.
Yeah.
You know, there's a whole song with women. She has these relationships. You're with her the whole time. And you are still, you believe it, but you're still a little shocked when she takes that gun and delivers that. So
well, I think to like put it in a sentence, like you watch Maria lose her innocence.
Yeah.
You just watch it on stage. You watch her break.
Absolutely. That is exactly how, yes.
It's
that is the sentence.
It is watching someone go from hopeful to completely shattering is tragic to watch anywhere.
Right.
But like especially when you have Bernstein's score beneath her. Like it's just this, like I was listening to the soundtrack in prep for this like the last week. And it's just because it's just so beautiful, and I forget how beautiful it is until you go on a kick and it just is in the background. And I listened because in the original soundtrack they had that whole moment is on there for you to listen to.
Yes.
And I just started crying. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I don't cry that much, but wow, like that just hit me in a place. It's so like listening to her speech about it and knowing what's happening in today's world is just absolutely like.
And also, what does that say too? That's kind of embarrassing
it's
and
so
really sad that is still so relevant in so different levels.
Yes.
That Maria's speech is relevant in so many different contexts right now. Almost more context now than it was when it was created, which is
it's upsetting.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, it's really like upsetting. Like we said something similar with even Once Upon a Mattress. We're like, this is still relevant. It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be
relevant anymore. But it still is, and it's very upsetting as a society.
But yeah, I think Maria was done really well. Going through her iterations, I know this is getting a little bit out of the golden age, but I just want to touch on this before we segue to their relationship with Anita and then going to Anita.
Yeah.
They again cast white people in the movie.
Yeah.
For Anita. Or not Anita, Maria. Anita was not. Anita was Puerto Rican as well.
Yes.
They made a big deal of every time Anita specifically needed to be.
Yeah.
Whereas Maria didn't matter, which like also I also don't love that because she's more of the ingenue, sweet, you know. So that like I hate that.
Yeah.
But, fun fact about the movie is Audrey Hepburn turned down the role of Maria. She was offered it first.
What?
Yes, she was offered it first. She turned it down because she was pregnant and she had quite a few miscarriages. So she was really concerned, which I totally get it, girl. Not even just like the stress of being in a movie, but the physical activity. Because Anita and Tony aren't the biggest dancers, but they still dance a lot.
Oh yeah, like Maria's still dancing. There's a lot of emotions.
They all are fully dancing.
Yeah.
Like, so that's a lot of activity. So not only the mental of doing a show like that, but also the physical toll. She turned it down.
Good, because I don't see that.
Right? But yeah, she was offered it first.
Fascinating.
So, and then something that they did hail as the Spielberg, Spielberg, I don't want to say it like that, but the Spielberg adaptation, was that they did finally cast POCs in the show.
Yeah.
Something interesting though that in the original, I should have wrote her name down and I didn't, but one of the featured dancers in the original movie was Asian American. And she was so excited because at the time, I mean, Asians were getting even less roles than anybody else. I mean, they were very far down the totem pole unless it was like, it's just not great. Yeah. So she was so excited that she was that she could pass as that to be a featured dancer. And in the movie that, like I said before, this movie blew up. The movie did very, very well. Did way, way better than the musical. The movie started clothing trends. People were dressing like, specifically, which I think is so interesting. Bernardo's specifically his outfit at the dance, where he wears the deep purple and the skinny tie. That outfit is popular now.
It is, yeah.
And this movie came out in like 61 or something. Yeah. So that's so interesting. Like the juxtaposition of those bright colors, they made a big deal about jet specific colors and shark specific colors, and they did not mix. They did not switch. So that was very interesting. But now I've tangented into so many things. There's so many things you can tangent into that have nothing to do with women, which is so frustrating. But I just do want to touch on that through the iterations. It did take a long time, which is very frustrating because even they did a re-recording of the cast recording and stuff like that. It took until like the 2020 to finally have more POCs and full POCs of the cast. I'm sure in other onstage renditions in recent times that was the case. But even in the final cast recording that Bernstein was involved with, she was white. So it was like, come on. But what are you going to do? But I just want to touch on that we're slowly getting better. And that one in the movie, they did cast more singers first as opposed to dancers in the Spielberg version. Now, going into Maria and Anita's relationship, this is another show. We are finding, at least for me, a surprising amount of, which I shouldn't have been surprised because like, you did mention that this was like the rise of the female duet.
But we have evidence now.
There's lots of women and not lots, but like the more there have been, and maybe we just like picked the right shows.
Probably that too.
There have been more women having friendships than I expected. In this genre and this time period. So we talked a little bit already about how like I fully believe that Maria and Anita were like, well, we're gonna be family. Like we already are.
I love it's such a good because
that's how they treat each other.
It's a sisterly relationship and a friendship, which is really unique and wonderful on stage. And Anita is the nurse character. It's the confidant.
And she is a little older.
Yes,
and definitely is portrayed a lot older than she is. Yeah, because it feels like she's in her 20s, but she's clearly not because she like was also at the dance.
Like we're like, wait a minute. Like I feel like the casting makes us understand that she is the older.
Yes,
has seen things, is almost the mother because there's not a mom in this family of theirs, so there's like having that maternal watch elderly sister watch over Maria in this country. Yeah. Is really, really wonderful. And just they have this beautiful duet that's not, a lot of the female duets have actually been very, not as plot driven. I would say that Guys and Dolls was plot driven, but was more reflective. So that was kind of nice. But this is like a full on argument. Like between the two, which I love so much.
They did a really great job for no women being involved. Yeah. Which is super sad to say because it's now like the second time I've said this about a female relationship because I think we did this about White Christmas as well. Yeah. Where like that felt very much like sisters, like well-meaning sisters not realizing. Yeah. So in a very obviously an incredibly different context. But But their relationship is so fun. Anita's role is quite big for being a side character, being the secondary female lead. And not sister, but definitely treated like such. She is much more dance heavy. There are a few tropes that they did clean up because they did give her a little more of the kind of stereotypical sassy Latina. Yeah. And I think at the time they thought they could get away with it because they had Cheetah in that role.
Yeah.
But since then, actually, Lin-Manuel Miranda rewrote, he made it Spanish.
Oh, cool.
For the Spanish translation in 2009, he translated it.
Nice.
Into Spanish. And at that point, because he had it in his hands, he also updated it. And he went through and was like, we are going to change some things to make them more appropriate for and more culturally appropriate and more sensitive to that, which was really cool. Sucks that it took until 2009, but
it happened.
But love that he did it and love that they did a whole Spanish version. I think that's really, really great. And he was a perfect one to do that.
Yeah.
Considering his background as well.
Yeah.
And I believe most of that was Bernardo and Anita.
Yeah, when they have conversations.
Cleaning up a little bit and her stuff just to make it a little less stereotypy. Because that's probably the only, at least from my point of view, that seems like the only negative. And even then it's not quite as in your face.
Yeah.
Because Anita's great. Anita's so fun. She has great songs.
Yes.
She also has a full arc because at the beginning she's like, absolutely don't talk to any of them. You know, and by the end of it, she even with there's so many things. Her boyfriend is murdered.
Yep.
Is murdered.
Yep.
During this.
Dealing with that.
Her boyfriend is murdered, and this girl who she treats as a sister is like wanting to be with his killer.
Yep.
And she is still like they have a whole argument and everything, but she's still understanding.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
In a great way. I'm obsessed with her.
Yeah. I just like, I would not have the strength. Like would not have the strength.
Absolutely not.
To deal with that in any way. And I mean, there's a part of like I think there's a lot of comments even with the women in this about the guy's violence and
for sure.
And there's a part of her that has to know that Bernardo probably was trying to kill him too.
Oh, for sure.
That, like so there I understand a little bit of that, like getting to the point of being able to help Maria instead of like casting her aside. But it's just like she just goes through so much in this show and still ends up trying to be a figure of resilience and a figure taking care of Maria. And then, I mean, not to mention even what happens to her when she goes and tries to ask for Tony.
Yes.
She goes through so much.
Yes.
Like
she tries to be the one to be like, let's stop this crap.
Yep.
And get so much for it. And I think it makes that last speech even more powerful that it's not Anita.
Yeah.
Because you would believe it. You would believe Anita screaming at everybody and being like, get it together, your own children.
Yeah.
Like you absolutely, that is things she has thought. I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it being Maria shows so much growth of not only Maria, but how much Anita has put her trust and faith and helped Maria as well. Yeah. And I love that.
And I love the fact that like we have I Feel Pretty, which is not just Maria, it's this whole group of women. No,
it's a whole group of women, yeah.
Which is amazing. And America, which is one of the best songs. And one of the boldest songs if you start thinking about what Sondheim wrote. And what
both of those songs were almost cut.
Of course they were.
Yeah, they were both almost cut because of the lyrics.
Yeah.
They were both almost cut because of the lyrics. They thought it was too racy, too clever, and it wasn't like bashing him at all. If anything, it was a compliment. They weren't upset by it.
Yeah.
But they were like, it doesn't fit with the modern music. It's not going to translate to radio well, which is something they had to consider in the Golden Age. Yeah. Because, look at My Fair Lady. Look at all these things.
Yeah.
It's like you wanted to top the charts because that was your goal. And those, they were very concerned wouldn't.
Yeah.
And eventually they decided that they should stay. And now they're like the two favorite shows music, like pieces of the entire show.
I mean, it's just like America itself. I listened to a repeat when I was listening to it. I'm like, these lyrics. One, he allowed.
I know a boat you can get on.
Yeah, but like it's just they're so clever, and there's flat out things like if you're all white in America.
Yes,
like there's just they come at the actual issues, which is like bold for them
in a playful way, though. Yeah, like in a blunt, playful way because they're dancing this whole time.
Yeah, it's like
and laughing.
That's how you get away with it. But but it's very blunt about the reality of what it means to immigrate into this country.
Yeah.
And like the guys being very much like, this is not good either. Like that they're talking about the American dream in the 50s. They're discussing that like hopeful. They're like, I'm just like, oh my God, this is playful and fun and catchy as crap. But they're getting away with a lot of commentary.
So much.
About the situation right now. So they allowed what should have been people of color playing these roles, like the idea of that group to be witty and clever, because a lot of times they'll fall into the trap of writing people dumber than they actually are because
that's where they also fell into the sassy,
that's true.
Like the feisty, the like that's why it walks that line of like, oh, that's nice you did that, oh, but you did that because of racism.
It's not perfect. there's you got to give and take with it because it's still written in the 50s,
right.
But I think it took a lot of
but still very well done.
I was listening to lyrics, I'm like, wow, this is blunt.
Yes.
In such a fun way. So I really love, and it's also a group of women that has nothing to do with Maria in that moment. Maria's not part of that.
No.
Like, I think that's fascinating too. That you have this entire number that has not Tony or Maria in it. That is so iconic. So
they're both falling in love. They're busy right now.
Yeah, they're busy, like probably like writing names.
Being in love, books, it's fine.
You know, like, it's just so good. I just like, and like, it's tragic when Anita. I mean, they do it with dance. I hate the attack on her. It just like it's so gross. I mean, it's reality, which is
no, it's done well.
It's also the point of like, oh, we're gonna put this on stage in the 50s and do it in a way that's palatable, but also like we all know what happened.
Right.
Oh boy.
No, it's
it's amazing Anita doesn't go in like on a rampage after all of that. But
I think she's emotionally, mentally exhausted. So I don't blame her for not.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And I think that was a purposeful choice to make Maria, because if Anita did that, it would not have been the same. It would not have landed the same.
Yeah.
I don't think the story would have been as powerful.
Yeah.
Because she already thinks that. Yeah. She already thinks they're all being morons.
Anything. How she acts as they walk away.
If she was given that monologue, people would walk up and be like, yeah. Whereas because it's Maria, you have no words. You're devastated that this sweet, that Cinderella just scolded you with a gun.
Yeah.
So,
Anita doesn't need to say anything by the end of it. Because all the people she's looking at know exactly who she is. The Jets know what they've done. All she has to do is a look. I would love to just have a compilation of how people are Anita in that last moment. Like, there's so many things you can do without words. That would be up to the actress. That I think is really, really fascinating. So yeah. She's great.
Cool.
She's such a good kid. They go through so much.
There's a lot in this show, and I understand why at the time the musical, it did not flop by any means, but it was not a great success. Whereas now you can't live without it. So it's very well done. I think it's aged embarrassingly well, and I only say that because of the state of the world.
Yeah, sadly, still so relevant.
Sadly, yes. But let us know what you think about these two amazing ladies. We have a lot for After Hours. I'm very excited. And I was hoping there were more female fun facts in the show, but I don't think there are. I think I said them all because there aren't very many ladies.
Both Anitas
involved
who were in the movies won an Oscar for their performance, correct? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, both of them did. I think you're right.
Yeah. So I think both.
Anita became the third character to produce Oscar wins for 2 different performers.
Yeah. Like it's I mean, that just shows how much impactful the role is itself.
Yeah.
In a movie that it spans these 2 versions of it.
Right.
With Oscar wins. So
that's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we're ending with a female fun fact because my goodness, so many men that we're going to talk about in the after hours. So, well, we will see you in the after hours and have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks for listening along with us.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Damsels in Dialogue. Tune in next week as we give Iowa a try and dive into Marion the Librarian in The Music Man.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, you can help us reach even more listeners by subscribing to the podcast and leaving a rating or comment on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you're listening.
If you want to join us for even more discussions and opinions about West Side Story or any of our episodes, head over to our Patreon. There you can support the podcast and unlock an entire library of exclusive after-hours video podcasts with a new one arriving each month. You can also unlock research notes, bloopers, and more.
Follow us on social media and at our website on damselsindialogue.podbean.com. Until next time, this has been Damsels in Dialogue.
Have a nice day.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Royal Princess Parties, LLC, and is produced by Hello Out There Audio, part of Hello Out There Productions.